welcome back to the Token Intelligence Show. AI is changing the way that we work. And here on the Token Intelligence Show, we help you cut through the hype. We show you the state of the art and help you apply wisdom to be a great leader in this new environment that we're all trying to figure out. And today we have a really interesting question, John. And it's going to be fun for our listeners because I answer this question with a no, and you answer this question with a yes.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a bake-off here, or a difference of opinion. Here's the question. We'll get right into it. Should you be worried about using the latest AI model? And before we get into a very heated debate, let's just define what we mean by the latest model, which I think is helpful, and the pace of change there, just to level set, because I think we'll have listeners who will know exactly what we mean when we say that, and then other listeners who may not even be familiar with that concept because it's baked into the AI app that they're using.
Right.
So the latest model. First of all, what is the latest model, John? Do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah. But, by the time we release this, it might be different.
That's true.
So the latest frontier models would be from Grok 4.5, from Anthropic would be Fable 5 or Mythos, if you have access to Mythos. And then from ChatGPT, OpenAI is a whole GPT 5.6, and there's 3 versions of it.
Yep. And those are from Frontier Labs, so give a quick definition on Frontier Labs.
Yeah, I used that term the other day, and people are like, what are you talking about? Yeah, so Frontier Labs, I don't know if there's a precise definition, because I do think it changes. I think for sure everyone I think would consider Anthropic and OpenAI Frontier Labs.
Yep, absolutely.
And outside of that, I don't know. Do you think are Google and Meta and XAI still Frontier?
I would definitely consider Google on the frontier.
Yeah.
And XAI I think is very close. But it's not evenly distributed. Actually,
right.
We do report at Vercel called the AI Production Index.
Okay.
AI Gateway Production Index, which is a bunch of telemetry that we collect from a product that we have called AI Gateway that actually gives you access to any model that you want.
Right.
And you just pay cost, which is cool. But what's interesting is that XAI leads in certain types of work.
Sure.
So video in particular.
Sure.
It's very, very good at video, right? Whereas sort of standard text generation, it's the spend and adoption is not nearly as high as Anthropic or OpenAI or even Google, right? So it's not easy to say. It's actually difficult to say who's a clear winner.
To me, frontier would mean you're the winner in something, right? Like you're the top for some meaningful type of work you might do with AI.
Yes, but again, that's not evenly distributed.
It's not.
It's good for us to spend just a moment on this because I think it's really helpful. This is not obvious from reading the news, but the data actually says that Anthropic, which tends to be the most expensive, it can kind of vary depending on model releases and the workloads that people are running. But on Vercel's AI Gateway, Anthropic actually consumes most of the money. And when I say most, I mean, we're talking 60 to 70% of all the money that passes through the gateway, right? And that's not only because of the volume. It does have a large volume share, but it's because the price per token is literally higher, right? Google for a long time was the leader in sort of mid to low cost workloads.
Yeah.
And so, but I would consider both of them on the frontier because Google is what we would call the enterprise workhorse, right? There are a lot of workloads where you don't need the most expensive price per token because you don't need to use the absolute most intelligent model, right? And so, which will actually be part of my argument. But I would consider the frontier the labs, the AI labs who train these models, who are at the bleeding edge of what's possible with them,
Right.
which really the frontier is it's rare air because you have to be extremely well capitalized on the order of billions to have enough
Right.
money to buy the GPU capacity in order to just run the training runs and actually do research on
Right.
how to improve the models. And then you also have to hire extremely expensive scientists and some of the best thinkers in the world on this stuff.
Right.
But those models also tend to be the best, which is why Anthropic can command a really
Right.
high price per token.
Right.
There's a flip side to this equation because all of the frontier model providers that we just talked about are closed. So you can think about this
Right.
as terms of open source software, right? So you may go purchase, software like Jira. It's closed source. You pay them a licensing fee. They give you an account to use your software, to use their software, but you don't get to look at their source code. Open source software, you get to look at the source code. You can run it yourself.
Right.
There's hybrid models there.
Right.
We don't get to look under the hood of the frontier models from Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, right? But there's a whole nother class of model, which is
Google does technically have
an
open. Yeah.
yes, an open model,
And OpenAI has one too. You just never hear about it
right?
because pretty far behind their
Yep.
state of the art. Yeah.
So I think the reason I wanted to spend a minute talking about that is I think it's important to understand that the models on the frontier or frontier model providers,
Yeah.
frontier AI labs, these are all terms, they mean the same thing. Those are almost always closed
Yeah.
models. They
Right.
don't reveal what's happening under the hood, right?
Right.
And the term that's used there is weights,
Right.
the weights that are used in the model training. But there's this whole other class, which is why this conversation became really big in the last couple weeks, of models that perform close to the level of a frontier model that have open weights or would be considered open models or open source. Again, it's not quite this exact same thing as open source software,
Right.
but that's the right model to think about it from, right? You can actually download the weights and you could actually train the model yourself if you have the GPU space or the GPU capacity, which some people actually do. People literally set up chips in their houses on a rack and do this, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
So all of this boils down, and there were some big releases. So ZAI released a model called GLM 5.2, which was a huge deal because people said, wow, for certain types of work, this performs as well as Anthropic's
Yeah.
latest frontier model, which
Right.
would be Opus 4.8 or Fable, which
Right.
recently came back online. Not comprehensively, but at a fraction of the cost.
Right. Yeah. And as well, in that there are aspects that are as good. So depending on what you want to use it for, it may perform as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for some people who are using those particular workloads, like, well, my cost I'm now paying a fraction of the cost for essentially the same type of performance. And then Kimi 3 was another big model released last week.
Right.
That went through the same cycle, right? This is an open weights model that's a fraction of the cost that, in certain areas has performance that's as good as sort of the frontier question. So that's why I wanted to...
Well, and to be fair, we're talking about U.S. frontier. Because the two
We
you
are talking about
listed
U.S. frontier, yes.
are both China-based and probably would be considered Chinese frontier, would you say?
Yes, there's a great article we'll link to in the show notes from Stratechery, which is a wonderful blog. But there's an article that talks about this. Ben Thompson is his name. He's been writing the blog for a really long time and has a great podcast. But he talks about whether or not you could consider the Chinese models frontier.
Nice.
He doesn't because he talks about something called distillation, which is essentially a process where they use the frontier models from the US,
Mm-hmm.
distill the learnings, and then roll out their own models that have
Right.
near frontier level performance, but he
Right.
doesn't consider them technically frontier.
Right.
So
Okay.
I don't know. Interesting topic.
But it's helpful to think, like, just more commentary on that. You have U.S. tech companies, some of which that have been around a long time, like Google, for example, they're
Yep.
competing. You've got new U.S. tech companies like
Yep.
OpenAI and Anthropic that have raised tons and tons and tons of money.
Yep.
That are competing here, and then you have a few others like we mentioned, like Grok, ZAI, and Microsoft is like making their own now too.
Mhm.
But as far as frontier, people are usually talking about the OpenAI and Anthropic.
Yes. US
The
closed
U.S. closed
models.
sourced,
Yep.
usually. But it's worth talking about the two you mentioned, which is Kimi K3, which came out recently, and GLM 5.2. Those are Chinese-based, and they are open source, or open weight. And what that means is you have the ability to, not maybe you personally, but there's the ability to run them on hardware that's not associated with the model creator. Right? That's the practical implication here.
Mm-hmm.
Because sure, somebody might want to like take it and has the right compute power to tweak it or whatever, but it's usually, I can save money because essentially they're giving away the tech. You just have to find servers to run the tech on.
Yep.
Which is true in general, but I don't think the weights have come out yet for Kimi K3. So I think you have to use, have an account with them and run it in their infrastructure right now.
Yep.
So there is still a little bit of a lag with these models, which is interesting because at this point, it's functionally closed with the promise of being open.
Yes.
Right. Which so far it has been.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know enough about like. I would assume there's no guarantees other than like that's what they've staked their reputation on, which is something.
Right. So let's get to our debate.
Yes.
And back to the question, because the reason this was on my mind a bunch, and we messaged back and forth about it a bunch, is that if you just go by the news headlines, there are really big questions swirling around the economics of the entire AI model marketplace.
Right.
As you have these entrants that come in with near frontier performance at a fraction of the cost, how is that going to impact the price for frontier models? How's that going to impact, their ability to generate revenue after raising so much money? How is that going to impact the way that, people think about using different models for different types of work? And so I think that those dynamics can create some FOMO or questions around, well, am I just way behind if I'm not migrating everything over to Kimi K3 or GLM 5.2? And I think for a lot of people who maybe even use AI every day, that's kind of a difficult question to answer, right? There's a lot of ambiguity there, right? What's the advantage of switching, et cetera? So I'm going to give you the first word on this. And you think that people should worry about using the latest AI models. And I'm really interested in why.
Yeah. I think I have 3 reasons. One of them, I'm going to use one of your own weapons against you.
I love this. Okay, great.
All right. So Eric, if you don't know, loves mental models. One of the ones,
as evidenced by our library here.
That's right. So you remember the medium is the message, right?
Oh yes, Marshall McLuhan.
Yeah. So it suggests the form of communication shapes society and human behavior far more than the actual content of the information conveyed.
Yes.
So I think with these models, I think the medium is the message applies in a sense, where because like there's a broader medium where the medium's the same, it's AI.
Yep.
But there's a more subtle medium where if you're working with a different model, the medium slightly shifts.
Okay. Yes. I now slightly regret picking my side because I see what you did there.
and I mean, and I think one of the key things here and this is my practical workflow. I do not just use the latest and greatest for everything that I do. But my reason to answer yes here is if you fail to understand what is possible if you're only ever like optimizing for like using the cheapest whatever model.
I'm smiling because it's such a good point, and I agree with it.
And it's funny. I mean, I did a training yesterday on this with like a non-technical team.
Yeah.
And they don't think about the model picker thing.
Yeah.
Like they didn't, which is fine. Like it's not buried, but it's not like it's, you kind of launch a new task and you just chat with it, and it's built in a way where like I don't know what it's set to. Like it's just whatever it was set to, right?
Yep.
So we talked about like you can actually adjust it. You can adjust how hard it works. Which is helpful. But my main point in yes is this number one was you're changing the medium at least slightly. Two, you need to be like, and because of that, you need to be able to understand like what can you do now that you couldn't do before. And then three would be as you're using it, as the models get more intelligent, you are prompting your behavior changes, right?
Yep.
Because you need to give it less instruction, typically. Too much noise, too much steering, I think is the word that people would use.
Yep.
Makes it worse. So there's all these weird things that you have to think about and adapt your behavior, where it actually makes it a little challenging.
Yep.
To switch back and forth. And then my last point is the newest models often do things that are surprising and or get better at things that you didn't know you needed. That's what I would say.
Give a specific example.
So Fable is the latest as of today, Fable 5 from Anthropic. And one of the things it's really good at is calling and instructing of like other instances of itself or of a slightly less intelligent model. So we call it orchestration. But so imagine you had a really big task.
Yep.
And rather than giving it to a model like, hey, do all these things, and it would fall apart. It's just too much. B, if you give it to this new model that's really, really good at planning, it can write a better plan, one, which is cool. But two, it's actually way more intelligent about breaking out the plan and then divvying out task to like workers or like whatever you want to call them. Let's call them workers. And then reading the response back, like you did this, synthesizing, and then having a result. So that would be one, like you didn't know that you needed that. You didn't know that,
Yes.
So
although yes, that is a cost optimization measure on the part of Anthropic, because it's cheaper for them to delegate tasks. This is ultimately a good thing because that theoretically, as the market, as the market settles into a state or progresses towards a state of equilibrium, ideally, as Anthropic gets more cost efficient, that means that consumers get better. They get more intelligent about routing to different models, and so the consumer sort of benefits from that ultimately in the price that they pay.
And there's one other weird thing, non-intuitive thing about it, is the smartest models know a lot about the less smart models.
Yes.
Even about their capabilities.
Yep.
Which is really interesting because you can give it the flexibility of like, hey, I've got this lot of work to do. You figure out like A, how to break out the work, B, how to work in parallel, and C, match the model to the work.
Yep.
And the smartest model is very, very, very good at that.
Yep.
Whereas if you were to ask one of the less intelligent ones, it's not gonna do as well. And think about hierarchy, right? Like, which works better? Like delegating work up or work down?
Yep.
Like, yeah. So,
all right.
There you go.
So you should worry about the. Shouldn't
worry about anything, but
yes, that's actually a great.
But I think experiment, right? I would experiment with it, but from a really practical standpoint, after you feel like you understand what it does, I then practically work with the more mid-tier models on a daily basis, and then wait for a failure mode to push me into using a smarter one.
Okay.
So I don't actually like work that way. I just experiment that way. And I think that's worth differentiating.
Yeah. All right. Counter argument to your argument, which I largely agree with. This is great. I don't think, by and large, that the average person should worry about using the latest model. And I'll give you an example of why. And I'm just going to puff you up in this example. But, okay, if we think about, we're on, from Anthropic, we're on Fable.
Right.
The previous model family was called Opus.
Right.
The previous model before that was called Sonnet.
Right.
And then the family before that was called Haiku.
That one hasn't been updated in almost a year. Isn't that crazy?
Sonnet?
Yeah.
It's not surprising.
No, Haiku.
Oh, Haiku. Yeah. That's not surprising.
Yeah.
For no extra charge, Haiku is really good at certain things. It's actually great for writing, but we'll do another episode on that.
That'd be good.
Okay, let's just go back 3 families, which is significant. I mean, Sonnet is a very different model in terms of capabilities than Fable is, okay?
Right.
But if I came up with a task and gave it to you and then just someone random who we pulled off the street, and we gave them Fable and I gave you Sonnet, my guess would be that 9 times out of 10, you would do way better with Sonnet than the random person off the street would do with Fable, which is dramatically, objectively, like a more powerful, more intelligent model. And the reason I believe that is because you have built core skill in using AI very well and very intelligently. And I say that intelligently in terms of understanding the value of thinking really well before you ask the model to do something, right? Fable's very good at planning, but it's incredible at planning if you're really good at planning. Right? And so I firmly believe that there's this economy of scale that you get in using AI as a like understanding how to use AI as a craft, right? To perform your craft.
Right.
And it's a skill that you develop. And we've talked a lot on the show, and we'll continue to talk a lot on the show about the fact that AI itself does not lead you to that outcome.
Right.
That takes a lot of personal discipline and a lot of really hard thinking outside of the use of AI to become a real power user of AI. And so the reason that I don't think it's worth worrying about, which we'll have some caveats when we land the plane, is that someone who is extremely good at using AI can use a less capable model and do more than someone who is following the path of least resistance with the latest model available. And in fact, I actually think that using less capable models can even sharpen that skill, right? Is like doing things and using things to actually develop ultimately, which this is interesting. You brought this up in the way that you use it, in the way that you use different models. But I think if I had to summarize, or one way to summarize the point that I'm making, is that what's really important about the way that you talked about using sort of mid-level models in your day-to-day work and experimenting with the latest models, the latest frontier models, or the latest open weight models, is that you can notice the difference. And I think that before worrying about using the latest model, I would really focus on becoming the type of AI user who can notice the differences. That will truly unlock that I think is eye-opening when you use one of the more capable models, because you can actually notice like the fundamental differences or ultimately fundamental improvements in it.
Right.
And so there you go. That's my argument for why I don't think you need to worry about using the latest model.
Yeah.
I think you need to get really good with really any model. Now,
Right.
there are a couple of caveats here. So one is that, in large part, it depends on what you're doing, right?
Right.
If you're just having AI like read your Gmail and summarize, like it doesn't really matter,
Right.
Like it just, it's an LLM, it's a large language model, use whatever. Like it's probably going to do like a similar job, right? The more complex the work and the more things involved, the more capable sort of the latest like frontier model is going to be at executing that type of work, right? But also the less, like we said, the path of least resistance is that it will just sort of do a bunch of stuff under the hood and do planning and all of that, which can be very helpful. But it obfuscates a lot of that process under the hood for you, right? Which again can limit your ability to really develop craft in using AI well. So by and large, I would say like I don't think you need to worry. Now, to land the plane a little bit here, I'll put the landing gear down and then you can actually touch down.
Perfect.
We've been talking about this in the context of like choosing a model to do something. When you start to build AI workflows and AI agents that perform long-running tasks or a series of tasks that sort of ultimately ladder up to a pretty complex job,
Right.
You intentionally use different models for different things, right? So I'll give you an example. So we have a content agent at Vercel that my team has built out and works on, and it does a lot of different things. So for example, it may go do a bunch of research, right? It may draft an outline. It may go try to validate the accuracy of, technical details of a product, right? And you don't need to just throw Fable 5 at all of those tasks, right? And in fact, like you don't want to do that because it is very expensive, right? So if I want to generate an outline from research that has been collected, I don't need Fable 5 to do that, right? That is a like block and tackle LLM, like read the skill, all the research is there, and like generate a good outline, right? If we're doing complex research, right, like from multiple different, sources, and then trying to summarize that, or even trying to decide, or even having AI make decisions about where to look for additional information or do research publicly in the market, or in the public market or public internet, competitive research, et cetera. Fable 5 is going to do a much better job of that, right? Because it's a much more capable model. It can delegate subagents and all that sort of stuff. And so I think I say that selfishly to reinforce my point in that you don't need to worry about the latest model because as you build more and more complex agents and workflows, you're going to use different models for different things anyways. And that's why I think it's so important to understand and be able to notice the differences between the models so that you can make intelligent decisions about which model makes sense for which part of the workflow.
Yeah. So my mental model for this, so two things. One, my mental model is thinking about who would I hire to do this if it were a person? And if I think like, oh, this is like entry level, like that's pretty good guidance to like which model to use.
It's great.
Two, reaction to what you were saying with research or whatever. I do think it's still worth trying latest frontier models on things that you're doing successfully.
Yep.
Mostly as far as auditing, because it's like Fable knows a lot of the capabilities, like probably more than you or I, of the models below it.
Yep.
So it's great to be like, hey, audit this skill or workflow or whatever. These are the models I'm running it with. Like, where are the gaps? How could I tighten it? How could I make it more efficient? Whatever. That's really useful.
Yep.
And then occasionally I've run into things where I'm like, you know what? I don't think I need like a frontier, like the latest and greatest on this thing, but I'm going to run it and just see if I think it's better.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's better, I'll ask it why it's better, and we'll try to apply the learning back down, because I don't actually want to spend, the extra money
Yes.
on running it.
Yep.
So I think there's some really interesting trade-offs there. And I'm starting to think through this a lot as far as who do you want training? Who do you want that training role? That's a smart role. And
Like in your business.
Yeah, in your business. And if that
Yep.
trainer's continuing to get better and knows a lot about the capabilities of the things underneath it. So that's one. And then a practical one, back to like, I'm an everyday, like maybe I consider myself a power user, but I'm more of a knowledge worker than a programmer. I did this yesterday, and it's very simple. Did it with a client, and it went awesome. So I was like, hey, give me an idea that you're thinking about right now. So, I've got a presentation this, next week. It's like, okay, great. Like, give me the presentation. So it's pulled up a slide with a diagram of like a system that they were developing. I talked about the slide for 10 minutes. I was like, okay, watch this. So clipped like 10 minutes of the transcription from the meeting notes. Gave the image of the slide. I was like, build this, fake the data. Like, it didn't have to be real data.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, they're like, how did it do that? Like, what?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Like, what,
Totally.
like even like specific words. Like, I didn't say that. Like, how did it was like, oh, it was in your slide. I was like, oh, like, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last thought I'll share in terms of practical advice is circling back to the cost point that you just mentioned. If you're just on a plan that gives you access to the latest frontier models and you pay the same rate every month, right? There's some sort of subsidization happening there.
Right.
And if that's the case, then you can probably just set it to use the latest and greatest, and it doesn't really matter, right? If you're not hitting your usage limits.
Sure. Yeah.
This becomes, I still would stand by what I said in terms of noticing the differences, I think is important.
Yeah.
Like for
sure.
your long-term ability to use
sure.
AI well. But this really becomes interesting when cost does become an issue, right? Because just pointing the latest, closed weight frontier model at everything is very expensive.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that as you sort of progress in your level of complexity and you reach like usage limits, at that point, it becomes incredibly valuable to understand the differences between the models, know when it makes sense to use a frontier model, and then, like you said, also get into a cycle of experimenting where the models are themselves getting better at delegating, like across models, right?
Right.
The other thing I would say is that there are new models released all the time. And so when we think about Fable delegating tasks to, earlier model families or less capable models, right? You're sort of locked into the Anthropic ecosystem there, right?
Sure.
So another thing that I think makes a lot of sense is to use something like Vercel's AI Gateway that gives you access to all of the models, right? So that you can also test this across other frontier closed weight providers like GPT, or OpenAI's GPT families, or of course open weight models, like Kimi or GLM as well. Because if you get to the point where you're looking at optimizing cost, almost certainly you're going to expand beyond just using a single lab, which again, that's not bad, but you can get a lot more bang for your buck if you give yourself the option to experiment across different providers and not just sticking with like one single provider.
Yeah, and one really practical example, like if I was a security researcher right now and didn't have clearance to use like Mythos or GPT's CyberSec model, I would absolutely be using Kimi K3 through something like a Vercel gateway or some sort of gateway. Because that has the least guardrails right now as far as doing real cybersecurity research.
Totally. And I think the other, for sure there are less guardrails. I think the other thing is that you may discover that for certain tasks, models that are a tenth of the price do just as good of a job for you.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I think we're saying experiment, right? Maintain
Sure.
the craft of using AI
Right.
and experiment. So there you go. Don't worry about the latest model, but definitely experiment with it.
Right. Great conclusion.
All right. We'll catch you on the next one.